Hello, welcome to the channel. This video is about modal verbs. Let's get started. This is a new chapter and we're gonna see how many areas we gonna cover. Let's get started. Modal verbs. Parts of the color red. And introduction. Modal verbs are special verbs that have only one form. Okay, we never added ed, ing, or s to modal verbs. Using modal verbs to talk about ability. Using modal verbs to make requests and ask permission. To talk about possibility and certainty. Talk about necessity, obligation, and prohibitions. And using modal verbs to give advice, some hints, and a sample essay. So, what's modal verb? And what can we do with modal verbs? Let's take a look. Modal verbs are very special verbs that have only one form, and we never add ed, ing, or s to modal verbs. And we don't even use the auxiliary verb do with modal verbs as well. And we have many different modal verbs like can, could, may, might, must, ought to, shall, should, will, and would. And there are some areas to cover. Have to and need to are also used in a similar way to modal verbs. Using modal verbs and these expressions with bad infinitives too. Modal verbs are very easy to apply. However, what's more important are the function of using a particular modal verb. Let's take a look how many functions we're gonna cover. To talk about ability, Sania could hit the ball smoothly. To talk about making requests and ask permission, gonna borrow a tennis racket. Talk about possibility and certainty. Might she win another one? To talk about necessity, obligation, and prohibitions. She must lose weight. And give advice. You should take tennis lessons. And some hints. The bad infinitives is the infinitive without to. For example, just simply run, smile, travel. And we also do not add any ed, ing, or s and es. That is a sample essay. We can take a look and see how these modal verbs are located in the essay. Let's take a look. Sample essay. Must lose, ought to, should have, could hit, could I borrow, should take, might be, wouldn't allow, will tell. Today, we're gonna talk about two areas. The first one, modal verbs that talking about ability, and the other one is to be able to. Let's get started. The first one, modal verbs about ability. People use modal verbs can and could to talk about ability. And we form positive and negative statements with the word can, with the modal verbs can like this. He, modal verb can, plus a bad infinitive, like without s, ed, ing, or es. He can play table tennis very well. And for he, she, it, or either IVU day, the modal verb can and can't have no change. And after these modal verbs, we apply bad infinitive. That means the word play and the word dance will have no s, no ed, and no es. They can't dance anymore. Pretty straightforward. And for questions, the subject and the modal verb change places. Can you play table tennis? Can you play tennis? Yes, I can. Can you windsurf? No, I can't. Then how about ability in the past? What can we do? Let's take a look. People use could to talk about past ability. In the following cases, could is the past form of can. Example, when he was young, my grandfather could run the 400-meter race faster than anyone else at his school. So could run is talking about ability in the past. Well, past. When he was young is providing information of could run 400-meter race faster than anyone else at his school. Alright, another example. Question. Could you ride a bike? What time? When you were 5 years old. Yes, I could. We also use could to talk about when someone first be able to do something. I could swim when I was 4. This happened in the past. Okay, what time? When I was 4. So I could swim. My brother couldn't speak until he was 2 years old. What time? 2 years old. So until he was 2 years old is telling you the time. When I was 4 is also telling you the time in the past. So some hints. The negative form of the word can, spell cannot or can't. But we never use can separate with not. Very nice. Then what about to be able to? Let's take a look. Using be able to, we can use can to talk about the future because we never use two modal verbs after one another. We cannot say, for example, I will can. Instead, we will use will plus be able to talk about ability. Example, after I have passed my driving test, what coming happen in the future? I will or I'll be able to drive to work. If I fail my driving test, what happens in the future? I won't or I will not be able to drive to work. Then how about using be able to ask questions? Let's take a look. Will you be able to pass your driving test? Or when will you be able to give me a lift to the new territories? To be able to could use with other modal verbs except can or cannot. Let's take a look at these examples. You should be able to pass your test. I might be able to help you. And hints. Now we also use be able to instead of can in the present perfect and past perfect tenses. For example, I haven't been able to sleep recently, or she hadn't been able to sleep the previous night. This time, we will talk about 3 different usage of modal verbs. 1. Modal verb about request and permission, and request for I and request for you, and also some other hints. Let's take a look. What are they? Making request, asking permissions. What is the informal way of a request and a permission? And then a request for I and a request for you. And there's some other hints. First of all, we take a look at asking permission and request. First of all, we take a look at how to make a request and asking permissions. We use modal verbs can or could, may or might, plus bad infinitive to make request and ask permissions. In an informal situation, we can use can to make requests and ask permission. If that is a slightly more formal situation, we could use could instead of can. For example, can you lend me your calculator? Or could you pass me the salt? We use can and could plus bad infinitive when we want someone to do something. How about when we want to be allowed to do something? How should we say it? Let's take a look. We use the word can and could plus I, can I, could I, plus bad infinitive when we want to be allowed to do something. Can I borrow your calculator? Could I have a look at your newspaper? That is another alternative, requesting for I. Let's take a look how to do it. We use may or might. Now, might is a very formal one and it is not very common. Instead, we can use can or could in a more formal request. Okay, so for example, may I go to the toilet, sir? Then how about an alternative of requesting for you? Let's take a look. We use may when we want to be allowed to do something. We cannot make requests with may you or might you. Instead, Could you give me a lift? Then how about some hints we must care about? Let's take a look. Now in 2013 Paper 3 exam, many students lost marks in task 9 because their request sounds more like an order. You have to check. Now remember, in written English, it is always best to use polite language. But how can we do it? How can we write in a more gentle and more polite way? Let's take a look. We can make a request much more polite or much more friendly by simply adding please. For example, can I please come in? Could you show me the way, please? If we want somebody to do us a big favor, how could we say it? Let's take a look. When we ask someone to do quite a big favor, it sounds much nicer to ask, could you possibly help me carry this over? Of course, it must be a very big favor. Hello, welcome to the channel. This video is about modal verbs. Let's get started. This video is talking more about using modal verbs for possibility, as well as replying to requests using modal verbs. Let's take a look what we're gonna cover. Possibility. Using can, could, or cannot, could have, or can't have, couldn't have to talk about possibility. And also replying to request. And using may, may not, can, cannot. Other verbs like certainly, of course, sure, no problem, etc. And even using I'm sorry, I'm afraid. One of the very important functions of using modal verb is talking about how likely something's gonna happen. Possibility of certain things that happen in a way could be using different modal verbs to illustrate. And let's take a look what modal verbs could we use. We can use can to make a general statements about what is something possible. For example, it can be very cold. It can be very cold in winter. So using modal verb can for telling very cold sometimes in winter. You can easily get lost. Modal verbs can is telling people often get lost in this town. Then how about some things that is not really likely to happen, or we are not sure whether it's gonna happen or not? Let's take a look. We could use could to show that something's possible but not certain. They could come by car. It's really likely that they could come by car, but maybe not. And also they could be at home, but possibly they may not be at home at the same time. Then how about to tell the reader something that is impossible to happen? We use which modal verbs? We use can't be true. That can't be true to tell something impossible to be true, or cannot be serious. Okay, cannot be serious is telling something that is impossible be serious. Then what if we want to make a guess about something? And we could use which modal verbs? Let's take a look. We use could have. Modal verbs could have to make guesses about the past. For example, oh, it's 10 o'clock. They could have arrived by now. But obviously, it is just a guess. Where are they? They could have gotten lost. So we could also use the word could to make a general statements about the past, not just a guess. It could be very cold. Could be very cold is talking about sometimes it was very cold in the winter there. And you could easily get lost in that time. People often got lost in that time. And also we use can't have or couldn't have to say the past event that is impossible. Now for example, they know the way here. They can't have gotten lost. And if Jones was at work until 6, he couldn't have done the murder. And the hints. The negative form of can. It just spells either cannot or can't. We can't separate them to become can and a not. Next, we are using modal verbs to reply requests. Let's take a look. When someone asks for permission, we can answer by repeating the same modal verbs. May I go to the bathroom? Yes, you may. Or no, you may not. Can I come in? Of course you can. No, you can't. However, if you're just repeating these modal verbs, it could be a little bit impolite. How to make a reply in a more polite way? Let's take a look. It could be more polite when you are replying with certainly or of course, sure, no problem, or even okay for some informal situation. For example, may I have the menu? Certainly, sir. Yes, of course, sir. Can you help me? Yes, I could. Sure. Yes, okay. Or okay. And yes, of course. When we try to refuse a request, what can we say? We could say the following sentences. Let's take it up. I'm sorry or I'm afraid could be used when you are trying to reject or refuse a request. That would be sound quite impolite if you just simply say no. Yeah, that's the reason. Can I have the hot fudge sundae? I'm sorry, they're sold out. I'm afraid they're sold out. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid they're sold out. Some hints. It's quite common to agree a request for permission with the word certainly, of course, sure, no problem, and even okay. Today, we talk about offers, invitations, and possibility with modal verbs. Let's get started. Making offers, invitations, there are some modal verbs we could consider. Would like or would like to make a request or even an invitation. For something that is more certain and higher possibility, we could use will, shall, must, and for less certain, we have to use might, may, and could. And also, there is some other things that we could use for request and demand. Let's take a look into something more details. Making a request with modal verbs could be very common. However, it could be also very confusing. Let's take a look how to make it more clear and more precise. Let's take a look. Making offers and invitations. Using the expressions would like to make offers and invitations. To make offers, we can use would plus like this. Would you like a drink? Yes, please. I'd love to. Oh, no thanks. And would you like some ice cream? Oh yes, please. I'd like some. No thanks. And when we make invitation, we usually use a different presentations. We use would you like plus to infinitive. For example, would you like to come to my party? So bear in mind, the word to come, this to infinitive function as a blue. Would you like to come to my party? Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to too, but I'm afraid I'm busy that night. Would you like to go to cinema? Oh, I would love to, but I'm afraid I don't have any money. That is some hints that we could use would like to make a request. How to do it? We also use would like to make request. Example, especially in shops and restaurants. I'd like a coffee, please. I'd like 2 tickets to the Hunger Games, please. And also, if we offer to do something for someone, we could use expressions. Would you like me to? Would you like me to do that for you? And bear in mind, for sentence structures purposes, you, me, and to help, a function that's different blue. You is the subject. To help is something you like, so it's a direct object. And indirect object will be me, okay? And would like is the color red. Then using modal verbs to talk about possibility is even more confusing. But that is some way to help us to clarify it in a more clear way. Let's take a look. Use modal verbs like may, might, and could plus bad infinitive to talk about possibility. And we use will, shall, and must to talk about certainty. Of course, certainty is talking about something you are more sure, and with possibility, there must be some degree of something likely to happen. For something certain, we use will, shall, and must. For some that is less certain, we use the modal verb may, might, and could. It depends on the degree of certainty. For the word will, we talk about 100% certain of something that gonna happen. Shall is using for the first person, like I and we. Example, it will take a longer time than usual because take a look at the traffic. I shall be away for only a few days, so shall be is using for the subject I. Will take is talking about something 100% certain. And if you are having some high degree of certainty about something that is likely to happen, we could use must. There must be some special event today. But of course, we're not still very sure. When the possibility is around 50%, you use the word may. For example, it's a public holiday, so the supermarket may close early today. Might is very similar to may, but it expresses a slightly lower degree of probability. I don't think they will close early, but of course they might. And the modal verb could we use instead of may and might to talk about possibility. I'm not sure whether the calculator is. It could be in my bag. It might be in my bag. Both are okay. There are some other adverbs that we could employ in order to make our expression become stronger. Let's take a look which adverb we could use together with the modal verbs. We can make will and shall even stronger by putting adverbs to color green, like definitely and certainly. After these modal verbs, I shall definitely be back by Sunday. When we are talking about possibility in the past, we use might or could plus have and a past participle. For example, where is he? He might have gone to Tokyo. Why didn't he answer his phone? He could have left already. Today we're gonna talk about using modal verbs for necessity, prohibitions, and obligations. Let's get started. Necessities and obligations. Use the word must, have to, and need to plus a bad infinitive. And also some verbs that have a stronger obligation and less strong obligations. And besides, prohibitions. Using must not, cannot, and some other modal verbs like don't have to go or needn't go to, and shouldn't, oughtn't to. So the first part that use modal verbs to talk about necessity. Let's take a look. Necessity. We use must, have to, need to plus a bad infinitive to talk about necessities, something you have to do. For example, things that are necessary. And we use must, have to, need to, should, ought to, plus a bad infinitive to talk about obligations. Necessity, must, have to, and need to. And less strong obligation, should, ought to. Using must to talk about absolute necessity and very strong obligation. We use it to talk about in present and the future, but not in past tense. Example, all children must go to school. Professional tennis players must be very fit. Then how about have to? The modal verb have to. What situations should we use this modal verb? Let's take a look. Have to has almost the same meaning as must, but it can be used in any tenses. I had to walk to school when I was a child. You have to leave before 10 o'clock tonight. So both using past tense or future tense could also work with the modal verb have to. Then how about should and ought to? What these two modal verbs function as? Let's take a look. Should and ought to are used to talk about things we feel obliged to do, but may not actually do. I should or I ought to go to the gym, but I am too tired. Then how about to ask questions with modal verbs? We simply place the modal verb before the subject. Must we go to school today? Should I go to the gym? And there are some hints. The word need to, modal verb need to have a very similar meaning to must and have to. But is usually slightly less strong. And also, in spoken English, it is very common to say have got to, but only in the present tense. I've got to send out some emails tonight. Then the next part we must go through is prohibitions. Which modal verbs used for talking about prohibitions? Let's take a look. We use negative forms of must not and cannot to talk about prohibitions. You mustn't cross the street here. We cannot wear jeans to school. However, the negative forms do not have to and need not have a very different meanings from must not. You mustn't go in. It says no entry. It means you are not allowed to go in. You don't have to go in, but you can if you want to. It is not necessary for you to go in. You needn't go in. There's nothing in there. There is no reason to go. However, the negative forms should not and ought not to simply have the opposite meaning of the positive forms. I shouldn't stay here. I oughtn't to stay here. I really should go home. When we answer questions with have to, we put do at the beginning of the question. Do you have to take the test? Did you have to take a test? Today, we talk about uncertain, prohibitions, and necessity with modal verbs. Let's take a look what areas we gonna cover. Negative forms. Using could not, must not, cannot for prohibitions, uncertainty. Different modal verbs, their negative form to talk about prohibitions will be slightly different. So, let's take a look what area we're gonna cover with prohibitions. The negative forms will not, shall not, may not, and might not. Now, with may not or might is uncommon, and simply have the opposite meaning of the positive form. So, it won't take long to get to school will be the opposite. It will take long to get to school. Or the supermarket may not be closed, and I shan't be away for long. However, we have to be careful while using must not and cannot, and also could not, when we are talking about prohibitions. Never use must not to talk about uncertain possibility. We use must not to talk about prohibitions, and instead using cannot to say something that is impossible based on what we know. Now, for example, did you run all the way here? You cannot be serious. Or did she say she paid just $100 for her new phone? That can't be true. While you are talking about uncertainty, when we are talking about uncertainty, the word may not, might not will be very different from the other modal verb could not. Let's take a look. Could not has a very different meaning from may not and might not. We use could not to say something that is impossible, not just uncertain. While the other one, may not, might not, are for uncertain situations mainly. Example, he might not be sleeping. It could be maybe he is awake, maybe he is sleeping. But if we say he couldn't be sleeping, it's 2 p.m., which means it is impossible that he is sleeping. This is the last part of modal verbs, and we cover advices. How to give advices with modal verbs, and how many different categories of advices we gonna cover. Let's take a look. Forceful, less forceful, advices with modal verbs. And talking about idea with modal verbs. Should and should not, or ought to or not to, or friendly warning, necessity, as well as stronger advice using modal verb must and have to, and some other hints. There are two different categories when we are giving advice. One category is having stronger, very forceful advice, and the other category is talking about advice that is less forceful. Which modal verbs are more forceful And which modal verbs are less forceful? Let's take a look. We can use must, have to, need to, have better, should, ought to, plus bad infinitive to give advice. We use different verbs depending on how strong and how forceful our advice is. Forceful advice could use modal verbs like must, have to, need to, and have better. Less forceful advice could use modal verbs should and ought to. Talking about idea with modal verbs should and ought to. We use should not, ought to, not to say something is a good idea or a bad idea. And should is more common than ought to. Example, you should or you ought to take up a sport. You should not or shouldn't, ought not to, oughtn't to watch so much TV. How about giving friendly warning with modal verbs? Let's take a look. We use have better or apostrophe D better. Have better not to give friendly warnings. You better send in your application soon. You better not push that button. How about advise people that something is necessary or not necessary? Let's take a look. We use need to, need not to, or do not need to, don't need to advise people that something is necessary or not necessary. Example, you need to wear a helmet to ride that motorcycle. You needn't or don't need to wear a helmet in a car. When we are giving more stronger advice, we could use must and have to. Let's take a look. We use must and have to when we feel strongly that someone should follow our advice. You must see this film. It's absolutely brilliant. And you have to see it in King's Theater. That's my favorite cinema. And there are some hints when we are using modal verbs giving advice. Let's take a look. Remember, mustn't, don't have to, have a very different meanings. We use mustn't to give someone, to advise someone very strongly that they shouldn't do something. We use don't have to when something isn't necessary. You really mustn't miss this film. You can watch it on DVD if you want. You don't have to see it in the cinema. And also, we use should to ask for an advice. We usually use should I to ask for advice. Should I start playing football? Which team should I join? That is some common error about apostrophe D better. Let's take a look. The expressions you would better is always had better instead of should better. Bear in mind that. Wow, very nice. That's all for today, and that's all for all modal verbs video. And like this videos and subscribe our channel. There will be a new topic next time. Goodbye.